I have to say, going to Japan was really an incredible experience. We got there on March 20. We got the whole experience of coming through customs and going through that process. After we picked up our luggage, we took a bus to our accommodations. For the mission trip, we actually stayed in a church in Tokyo, in a subsection of Tokyo called Tachikawa. So we stayed in like a church slash office building for the Adventist church there. And we rode a bus about an hour to the Tachikawa station, and then we had to walk about 15 minutes, hauling all our luggage and everything to get to the church building. And our accommodations, there were big rooms, one room for the guys, one room for the girls. Most of the people stayed in those rooms. There were some smaller rooms. We got to stay in that kind of group setting, most of us. And it was neat because near the beginning of the trip we went a day or so early, so we had some time to settle in and kind of begin to get acclimated to the time change, because Japan is a 13-hour time difference from Eastern time, which is where we came from. I remember my first day there in Tachikawa. We had some free time, so we decided to go out and walk on the streets. Because we hadn't gotten to go out and see the streets yet. We had just gotten there the night before. And so some of my first impressions walking along were, we immediately noticed how clean it was there. So here in America, you might find trash or cigarette butts or whatever. In Japan, very, very clean, the streets. Also, the cars, they look different. A lot of them are way more compact. You don't see very many trucks. But also something about the people is that they're a little bit more shy, but still very polite. So those were a couple impressions I first had when I was walking out in the streets. It was cool just seeing the buildings, seeing how things were different. And later that evening on Friday, the first day there, people started arriving, more people. And we had about 60 people there that eventually, all gathered for the mission trip. And these people were from all over. A lot of us were from the United States, but there were even people from other countries. I know some from Australia, and I believe some Latin American countries as well. And so there was a large group of us. We gathered, and then the mission trip officially began Friday night, and then, of course, going into Sabbath. Now, the goal of this mission trip, of course, was to distribute 1 million glow tracts in Tokyo. Tokyo is the biggest city in the world. I believe it has around 37 or 39 million residents. And that's in a country of, I believe, Japan is around 120 million people, approximately, give or take a little. And so we were going to be in Tokyo the whole time. The goal was to distribute 1 million glow tracts while we were there. And back last fall, about 6 or 8 months ago, a couple of the leaders of the trip had gone there to get familiar with where we were going to be going, where we were going to be staying, and what we were going to be doing while we were there. They quickly learned that handing out glow tracts to people isn't exactly the best way to go about distributing these tracts in Japan, for a couple reasons. First of all, Japanese people, like I mentioned earlier, tend to be very shy, right? And they're not likely to take something from you if you try and hand it right to them, when you walk up to them. And also, if people around them see that they haven't taken something, then the people around them probably won't take it either. And so they kind of realized that this wasn't the best way. Well, with the help of some of the Japanese church members and pastors, they discovered that the best way to help reach the Japanese people and distribute these glow tracts was to actually do something called posting. Now, in the United States, we're not allowed to put things in people's mailboxes. But in Japan, you're allowed to go to their mailboxes, either a little mailbox out in front of their house or at the bottom of the apartment building, or to their door. There's a little slot on their door where you can slide the glow tract in, and it will go right into their house and fall onto their floor, where, in the comfort and privacy of their own home, away from the prying eyes of those around them, they can open the glow tracts and read them and find the truth inside. And so this was the method that we were taught and that we followed when we went to Japan for distributing these glow tracts. Tokyo is a very, very big city. You can like drive for hours and hours and still be in Tokyo. And while we were there, mostly pretty much totally and completely used public transportation to travel, which was in and of itself a really neat experience. Some of us on some days even had up to a 2-hour ride to get to the territory that were assigned to us. And what they would do is divide us up into different groups. Like I said, there were about 60 of us. They would divide us up into different groups and send us like, okay, today you're going to go to this train station, and this group you're going to this train station. And from there, our leaders, a leader in each group, knew the territory that we were going to do, right? And so we got the neat experience, sometimes challenging experience, of getting to navigate Tokyo somewhat independently in our groups. And there were some challenges with that because you will find signs in English, but a lot of people don't speak English, and it can be challenging to navigate the public transportation system of a country where the primary language is one you do not know. So I know there were a couple groups that got lost or ended up at the wrong train station, or one of the days there was rain and some days it was cold, right? So these are some of the challenges that we faced, especially we were going building to building, house to house, apartment to apartment, sharing these glow tracks. But I just want to reaffirm that, you know, despite these challenges, we really had a wonderful blessing. Something a little bit more sobering is that some days there were delays, and a lot of times there will be delays on the train tracks because people will commit suicide by jumping in front of the trains. And I know there were a couple days that our teams, there would be a little screen that said delay, and it would give the reason, and based on the wording we would understand that someone had committed suicide, unfortunately, by jumping in front of the tracks. And it was just sobering to stand there and realize that this is a country, you know, depression is high, suicide rates are especially high in Japan, and it's something that they're really grappling with, and something that some of the tracks that we were passing out were helping to address while we were there. And unfortunately that was, you know, some days we were delayed because of that, but it was just a reminder us how important the work we were doing was, because there are people dying every day because of, you know, their struggles that they're going through, the depression, and their need of a savior. Learn to adapt to their culture was really fun, and overcoming some of the challenges that, you know, we hadn't anticipated because of, you know, lack of knowledge on our part, or, you know, just lack of experience. That was fun. And one way, for example, that we had to learn to do that was a lot of times you can't just walk in the front door of an apartment building. You know, there's a little lobby area. You can't just walk into the lobby and look for the mailboxes, right? A lot of times that door is locked. And some days we would struggle to find ways to get into apartments to put in these glow tracks, which we had a right to do. It was just hard to get into the building. And but a couple days into the mission trip, we began to discover, with the help of some Japanese people and our own kind of, I guess, exploring, if you want to put it that way, we discovered that literally on almost every apartment building, there's the front door, and then there's a little door on the side. And that door is for anyone who wants to put stuff in mailboxes. It's perfectly legal to use. It's just not labeled. It's a little bit hard to find sometimes. And so, you know, that was one way we had to learn to adapt. Something we kind of learned throughout the process is that if you go around the side, you can find a door. And I'll put some videos up on the screen here. You know, sometimes we go and we find row after row of mailboxes, and you just put in glow track after glow track. And, you know, these people are going to come down later. They're going to open their mailbox. They're going to find these glow tracks inside. Also, you know, we had big bags. We would carry like 3,000 glow tracks, you know, a piece going out to the field. Some teams even 4,000 or 5,000 per person. That was something else we had to learn to adapt to, especially in the rain. You don't want to get them wet. Now, God really blessed throughout the mission trip, and throughout the course of the 6 or 7 days that we were going, you know, to the apartments and doors and leaving these glow tracks, we were able to reach our goal. Now, our goal was 1 million glow tracks. We actually ended up leaving 250,000 for the Literature Ministries workers and church members in Japan, right? So those glow tracks will actually continue to be a blessing and continue to be distributed even into the coming months. And we, by God's grace, met our goal of 750,000. And so we were able to reach that by the end of the last day, and that was a huge blessing. I want to tell you a couple stories from our mission trip, two that really stick out in my mind, looking back over the experience that we had there. One of them, one person in our group, Pastor David, he was going in and out of buildings, leaving these glow tracks, and as he was coming up to this one building, he saw a bunch of people coming in and out of one door that was wide open. And so he thought, well, maybe if I go in there, I can find the glow tracks. And so he went in there, and he was looking around, and someone came up to him who seemed to be like one of the workers at the building, and started kind of like angrily talking to him. And of course there's a language barrier. He didn't know Japanese, so there was this kind of like dialogue, and the guy saying something to him. He seemed to be a little upset. Pastor David, he didn't know what the guy was saying, so he tried to pull out Google Translate, and so they weren't, being able to communicate. So this man took Pastor David to the security office, and Pastor David was a little apprehensive. He didn't know what was going on. He couldn't understand, and the guy took Pastor David to the security office and then ended up leaving, and the security officer started talking to him. Well, Pastor David by this point was able to get out Google Translate, a translation app on his phone, explain what he was doing, and translate it into Japanese for the guy to read. And the guy, he understood what he was doing, and he actually was a lot more soft-hearted to the work we were doing and open to us doing it in the building. And so he actually led Pastor David. He said, through translation, he actually was able to tell Pastor David where the mailboxes were. And he actually led Pastor David into this room, and there were like 180 mailboxes that Pastor David was able to leave glow in. And that was actually really cool, because sometimes God works through unlikely sources, So we had a couple experiences throughout the trip where, non-Christians who didn't know us, didn't exactly know what we were doing, helped us show us where these mailboxes were that we could find. And God worked through them to help us accomplish our goal as well. One other story that comes to mind, a friend and I were going to houses. We were just walking up to their mailboxes and dropping them in. And this one house we went up to, as we were walking up to it, someone drove into the driveway. And so we turned to see the car, and the lady rolled down her window and kind of motioned to us. So we walked over there, and luckily I was with a friend who knew a little bit of Japanese. So he was able to try and explain what we were doing a little bit, and kind of, at least a friendly greeting and a little bit of basic Japanese with her. And we gave her the glow tracks, and she gladly accepted them. And we kind of used Google Translate to explain what we were doing and have a brief conversation. And then out of her purse, she pulled out a little card and gave it to us. And as it turns out, she was Jehovah's Witness. So I thought that was pretty neat, being able to meet a Jehovah's Witness in Japan. And she gladly accepted the tracts. And I don't know what impact they're having in her life. I don't know if she's read them. I don't know, where they are now. But I know God does, and I know God knows where she is. And I just pray that those tracks will be a blessing to her. And I invite you to pray for that as well. Looking back at the mission trip, there are so many things I couldn't have foreseen beforehand that ended up being such a big blessing during the trip that really were impactful to me. And I think that one of the biggest things that impacted me while I was there was actually visiting one of the shrines. Those are the two biggest religions in Japan, Shinto and Buddhism. And we went to a Shinto shrine while we were there. Well, we went to maybe one or two shrines. And I specifically remember standing there watching people come up and take time to worship their ancestors. And I just remember standing there and thinking, wow, these people, they don't know any different. They don't know any better. And here they are coming, worshiping their ancestors. It was really interesting. They would walk up, they would bow. I can't remember exactly how they would do it, but then they would clap and they would like bow again or something like that. And the idea was that they were trying to wake up their ancestors, so that they would hear them. The clapping was supposed to wake them up, and then they would pray, to my understanding, hoping that their ancestors would grant them whatever they came in request for. And that was really impactful for me, just standing there, really seeing the fact right in front of my very own eyes that someone believed that and with all their heart probably believed that their ancestors were going to help them, really kind of changed my perspective. Like, wow, like these people need to know the truth. And with only 1% of the population in Japan being Christian, who is there that is going to tell them, right? They need to know the truth, but there are so few workers in Japan to tell them. And it kind of changed my perspective, seeing them come and worship, realizing that the truth that they needed is what we had and what we were there to bring. And I think that motivated me a lot to really make sure that I was doing my best to give out as many as I could, and let God lead me and guide me while I was there. And we don't know where all those tracts went that we passed out. We don't know who has them, who's reading them. We may not ever know the impact that we had, but I just pray that the tracts that we left there, the people that we talked to, I know some of the missionaries were even able to pray with some Japanese people. Well, we may never know the impact that may have. I just pray that those tracts will do a work in Japan that really needs to be done to spread the truth, and maybe one day I'll be able to go back there. Maybe one day you'll be able to go there as a missionary. But pray for the tracts, pray for the people, and also pray for our Adventists and Christians in Japan. There is such a great work there that needs to be done. And also I invite you to pray in your life to see where God is leading you and how you can be a missionary for God. Because you may not be able to go to Japan, you may not be able to go to another country, but one thing for sure that this mission trip reminded me is how easy it is to be a missionary in my own country. It was a challenge to communicate and distribute the tracts, but it was still worth it. How much more is it worth it to continue being a missionary here when I come home, where when I hand out the tracts, I can actually say something to them in English. If they ask me a question, I know how to respond. I speak the language. I know the culture. I can continue working here, right? And until I go on another mission trip, Lord willing, I know that here, where I am in my own country, I can continue to be a blessing and work for God, and it doesn't just have to be somewhere else in the world. I hope to go on another mission trip soon. I know this grew me and taught me some incredible lessons. And I just one more time invite you to pray for the people of Japan, but also continue to pray in your life about how you can be a blessing for God and work for Him and share His love with those around you, in your community, and in your town.